The Circle of Light. Let me tell you about a small town in America called Harmony. Now, Harmony wasn't famous, but it had something truly remarkable, a tradition called the Circle of Light. Whenever someone in the community stumbled or made a mistake, the town didn't rush to judgment or punishment. Instead, they came together to remind that person of their worth and their place among them. This wasn't a fancy ritual or something they'd learned from books. It was simply their way of reminding each other that even when someone made a mistake, they were still part of the community. They believed in lifting people up, not tearing them down, and guiding them back with love. This story begins on a summer evening when 17-year-old Jake found himself frustrated and restless. His parents had begun arguing again, and his grades had slipped. He felt like he couldn't do anything right. That evening, walking alone through town, he passed the old brick library. Its walls seemed too perfect, too neat, too much a reminder of everything he wasn't feeling. Without thinking, he grabbed a can of spray paint he'd taken from his dad's garage and scrawled jagged lines across the wall. The next morning, the graffiti was the talk of the town. The library had stood for over a century, built by Harmony's founders. To the townspeople, it wasn't just a building. It was a symbol of their shared history. Seeing it defaced upset them deeply. Some muttered about how kids these days didn't respect anything. Others wondered aloud who could have done such a thing. But then Miss Clara, the town's elder, spoke up. At 83, Miss Clara was known for her calm wisdom and her belief in second chances. "Let's not rush to judge," she said. "Whoever did this is part of our community. If we punish them, we only push them further away. Let's remind them of who they really are. It's time for a circle of light." The murmurs of discontent softened. When word got to Jake's parents that the town planned a circle of light, they were surprised. They knew Jake had been struggling, but they hadn't realized how much until now. That evening, as Jake stood in the town square, he felt a knot of dread in his stomach. He knew he'd messed up, and he expected the townsfolk to call him out in front of everyone. But when the crowd gathered, their faces weren't angry. There were no scowls, no wagging fingers. Instead, they formed a large circle around him, their eyes kind, their postures open. The string lights hanging between the trees gave the square a warm glow, and the fireflies flitted softly around them. Miss Clara, the town's elder, and a steady voice of wisdom stepped into the circle. Her presence was calming, and when she spoke, everyone listened. "Jake," she began, her voice gentle, "we're here tonight not to punish you, but to remind you of who you are. Mistakes don't define a person. What defines us is how we move forward, and you are not alone in this." Jake shifted uncomfortably, his gaze fixed on the ground, but one by one the townspeople began to speak. First came Mr. Thompson, the town's mechanic. He wiped his hands on his ever-present rag before stepping forward. "Jake, last winter I saw you shovel snow from Mrs. Anderson's driveway without her even asking. That wasn't for show. It was because you're a good kid with a good heart. That's the Jake I know." Then Sarah, one of Jake's classmates, spoke. "Jake, your jokes make my math class bearable. Even when I'm having a bad day, you make me laugh. You have a gift for lifting others up." Finally, Miss Clara stepped forward again. "I remember when the community garden fence needed fixing. You showed up with your tools and got the job done, without waiting for anyone to ask. That's who you are, Jake. Someone who cares for others. That's the Jake we all know." As the words flowed, Jake's shoulders began to relax. His head, which had been bowed in shame, lifted. He listened intently, tears forming in his eyes as he realized how much the people in his town cared for him. When everyone had spoken, Miss Clara handed Jake a small journal. "Take this," she said. "In it, write down the good you see in yourself and the things you want to work on. Tonight, you've been reminded of the light you bring to this community. Use it to guide you forward." Jake took the journal with trembling hands. Tears filled his eyes as he looked at the circle of faces around him. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice cracking. "I didn't think about how much this would hurt all of you. Thank you for not giving up on me." Over the next few days, Jake took action. He worked with some friends to clean the graffiti from the library wall. Inspired by the support he received, he painted a mural in its place, a beautiful image celebrating the town's history and spirit. The circle of light had done its work. Jake hadn't just learned from his mistake, he had grown from it, and the people of Harmony had shown once again that kindness, love, and understanding could mend even the deepest wrongs. The next time someone you know makes a mistake, be it your child, your spouse, your coworker, or a stranger, remember the story of Harmony and their circle of light. When someone stumbles, help them find their way, not with anger, but with kindness, not with punishment, but with understanding. Because sometimes all it takes to guide someone back to the right path is a little light from the people who care about them. And so the circle of light continues, a shining example of how a community can come together to lift one of its own.